We are sitting in on a book club discussion of the book Fist, Stick, Knife, Gun by Geoffrey Canada, about the violence in the inner cities, mainly the South Bronx where he grew up. I would like to thank all of you lovely ladies for joining us today, and a special thank you to Mrs. Angelina Pretty for letting us use her Beverly Hills accommodations.
Oh, it is my pleasure, Lawrence. I feel that there are some real issues that should be addressed today about how much the violence in society has changed.
What hooked me was the very first line in the preface. It was a bad summer. I was into the book, and wanted to know why, and how it was so bad.
I understood from that first line that Rose just shared that this book would be a very vivid and graphic one, that made a statement and hopefully ended with solutions.
The issues that made themselves obvious to me were the constant presence of fear that came from violence, and how there seemed to be no real positive solution until Canada came back.
I found that strikingly with poverty came a slew of problematic issues which arose to violence, such as poor education, that does not cater to the life surrounding poverty. This type of education did not teach solutions or peacekeeping methods, which Canada recognizes in his later years and creates the peacekeeping program.
I found that with poverty there were more broken homes and one-parent families, many of who were trying very hard to stay afloat by working many jobs. Although this could be seen as a positive role model, these parents were often absent in the children's lives, so the role models were older and tough children from the streets.
I found that when Canada talks about happenings on the streets, or the block, it reminded me a bit of Lord of the Flies, with boys just doing what they want and trying to survive. With what little knowledge they had of the skewed world they lived in, to create a hierarchy, using violence, on the block, or streets.
I have a question. Do any of you think that violence within these inner cities is transgenerational? Or, are these children predisposed to become violent since they live in these areas?
From the evidence presented in this book, it would seem that there is a direct correlation between the environment these people and children live in and violence. I think that transgenerational violence is expected in these environments of poverty and becomes a way of life. As Canada showed us, the only way out of the violent environment, back in his time, was through education and athletics. However, while growing up you still needed to maintain your street cred, or as he refers to it, your rep.
I found the progression of the gun interesting, as Canada recalls fighting with his fists to gain his rep, and then feeling so protected when he found the K-55. I think that as the violence increased, due to the high volume of drugs, mainly crack, that was going through neighborhoods, people bought guns for protection from being a victim.
As I mentioned before, one of the solutions, the peacekeeping program that Canada started to help children in these violent areas negotiate through a potential dangerous situation. What were some of the other solutions that have been successful in demonstrating the decrease in violence?
I found that Canada recognized the need for after-school and weekend activities for these children. They needed places that were safe and provided adequate activities to keep them occupied and out of danger and from becoming a victim. I thought the first place he went to work, after coming back to the South Bronx, in 1983, was the Ritalin Centers for Children and Families, started by Richard L. Murphy in 1970. The Ritalin Centers were developed to help prevent truancy for children between 5 and 12.
To add to that, Jenny, by 1997, after years of positive expansion and development, the Ritalin Centers became the Harlem Children's Zone, and caters to 100 blocks, which serves thousands upon thousands of children and families.
I found that the Taekwondo Club Canada started seemed to interest children and became a very popular after-school activity, with the children who seem to need the guidance and structure and a place to go that is not hanging out in the streets.
Canada started many different programs such as the Beacon Schools and Promise Academy, that also cater to the community and help children find a voice to stand up to violence.
Well ladies, what an informative book club meeting. I do know that Sarah was sorry she could not make it, but has joined us via video from her home in Westminster, Vermont.
Hello Sarah, so nice to see you. Sorry you could not make it out here. but I am sure your vacation has been full of leaf peeping in the great state of Vermont.
Hey guys, so nice to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. The leaves are beautiful here, but let's get down to the book. So, I would like to address how the Bronfenbrenner model can be used here in assessing how violence can lead to a mostly atypical development for these children. Starting off in the microsystem that is made up of family, school, peers, health services, and church, or other things that children experience daily. As mentioned before, children in the slums or ghettos, as Canada refers to the violence-ridden neighborhoods, are more prone to having less parental supervision and more time to just hang and get into trouble. Here is where the atypical development starts, if it hadn't started before due to abuse or drugs in the home. If there is nobody there to guide the child, then how will they learn? They will learn from their peers. Peers that have learned behavior from older peers. I believe Mike was the older peer Canada looked up to and learned how to act on the streets, how to obtain a rep, and how to act with heart. Mike also taught Canada how to fight and stand up and face fear. School was not necessarily a place for learning. It was a whole new domain for violence and fighting for yourself and your peers to attain a hierarchy or a pecking order, as Canada describes it. When you combine two of the microsystems together, you get what is called a mesosystem. So, for example, if one would choose peers in school, both have violence associated with them, so the outcome would be one that could potentially be more violent than the two separate microsystems. This in turn creates a cycle that could be never-ending if there is no interruption or solution. I think this cycle has been going for many generations, that the violence has become unimaginable from what you and I could even imagine or ever imagine. This transgenerational force of violence or atypical development increases for each generation with catalysts like cheap drugs, like crack, and the cycle of violence and the form of violence is raised to a new and even more violent level. The actions or outcomes from this violent or atypical development leads to headlines that seem like just nightmares to us. Quote, 2-year-old shot in head by stray bullet while playing outside. The solutions that Canada has created helped not only to break this transgenerational force of atypical behavior, but helped steer the development onto a more typical path to create new futures, brighter futures, hope, with less violence or no violence. See you ladies in the summer. Love from Vermont. Bye-bye.